Around the United States of America, reports strongly suggest that people have permanently, mysteriously disappeared since the implementation of recording such events. David Paulides of Missing 411 and the Can-Am Missing Project believes that a select number of these cases are due to extremely strange causes, maybe even paranormal, extraterrestrial, or interdimensional causes. Over the years, I've been tracking reports of different paranormal experiences. I've had my own encounters with strangeness and have had the honor to record others' supposedly true encounters too. Perhaps the most alarming, intriguing, and consistent experience type, however, is the kind of report alleging strange peoples and otherworldly animals in the woods, usually in association with UFOs, ethereal lights, and sometimes even exotic music, disembodied voices, and even physical contact, as we'll explore shortly. Although David Paulides might be the most famous figure in the realm of mysterious disappearances, these baffling cases are remarkably consistent over hundreds, if not thousands, of years, if the legend's community records and later government records are to be believed. Earlier in human civilization, unexpected disappearances were often explained by blaming Sasquatch, the fairies, the gods and goddesses, and UFOs, jinn, demons, or angels. And still, is there maybe more to this phenomenon than meets the eye? What if there are other types of beings, creatures, and people so exquisitely foreign to us that we around the world have yet to directly, formally classify them today? And what happens when strange encounters result in loss of life or an unexpected disappearance? Who or what is responsible for the death or the displacement? These are questions that we aim one day to answer in full. Earlier this year, I was approached by a friend of a friend. She brought to my attention several connecting details between Missing 411, old fairy lore, and an investigation that she was currently leading into one particular case. When I was presented with the details, I was truly shocked, uneasy, and I knew that I needed to do all that I could to support the investigation. What followed was a rabbit hole of intrigue, facts that rivaled fantasy in their grandiosity. And by the end of the formal inquiry, my disbelief had dissolved into shock and awe. Here's what we know. Our source has been investigating unexplained disappearances for many, many years. Her specialty, like David Paulides, is focusing on the search for potential strange science and or paranormal causes to reported disappearances. She claimed that most disappearances are far more easily explained by natural or man-made social causes, but that this case is unique. I was fortunate enough to meet and interview the investigative leader. This is what she told me. Quote, "The missing man had no logical reason to end his life, to drop his house, belongings, connections, routines, to run, to just disappear. He was a sporting, youngish guy with a serious love interest right there in the community. He was a well-known, well-respected educator. The parents of the children that he educated were reported to adore him. He was regularly invited over to dinner at specific homes after school," unquote. Continuing on, the source told me, quote, "Although he'd only been there about a year, everyone knew him. He was a popular man, he was highly active in the community, and was known to be a positive, social, generous person, for the most part," unquote. When asked what else he did in the town, my source said, quote, "Oh, he did it all. He had no children of his own and had a lot of spare time. Outside of formal teaching at the local school, he was apparently a professional vocal coach and taught singing lessons for the adults. He was also said to be a serious culinary enthusiast, and though he didn't have a farm himself, he was said to be passionate about supporting the large local farm. Over the years, he reportedly kept a few horses and enjoyed trail riding in the forests on his own. He was also said to be a fan of parties and celebrations. Reports say that he was often found at town and private parties as a beloved guest. In the beginning, I conducted my classic screening. I ran a full background check on my source. I interviewed the teammates, read alleged witness accounts where possible. I read the team's notes, and then I took notes on their notes. I had explained that I would only support and promote the case investigation and their team if everything checked out. Typically, this is where the fraudsters part ways with me, and yet they persisted. I was impressed by the investigation, for it all sounded solid and realistic to me. Every member of the team had a squeaky clean background, and all signs they pointed to each person being mentally, socially, physically sound. During the follow-up interview I conducted with the team leader, I asked, "Is there any chance that he passed away due to any drug or alcohol addiction?" "No," the source said. In the time he was building his life in the area, he was never reported to be suspected of being under the influence of anything other than sugar, love, or caffeine. He was also never seen drinking, smoking, or interacting with any intoxicant or being intimately involved with people who were known to be alcoholics or any type of addict. Let's go back a little, maybe. How did we get here anyways? I had to sit on what I was being told. Although everything looked, felt, and sounded genuine, allegations like this are rather uncommon today and regarded by most to be unlikely at least and fraudulent at most in the modern age. I decided to look into the area myself. I couldn't make it out to the scene of this alleged disappearance myself, but I joined the investigation team and together dedicated as much time as we all could to researching the region. What we found has forever changed us. In utilizing digital mapping programs and groundbreaking work put forth by Steve Mera of Project Doorway fame, we were bewildered to discover that the entire area, especially the forest and the land near the cemetery, indeed may well be seated firmly in a strong magnetic anomaly zone. According to Mr. Mera's work, strong positive or negative magnetic zones are entirely entwined with serious, long-term, and sometimes deadly paranormal activity. Major magnetic anomaly zones, he says, they hold the world's most enchanted, paranormally active land by far. Steve has been investigating the paranormal for over 30 years now, and perhaps most impressive to us is that all of his work, seemingly and perhaps paradoxically, is both thoroughly grounded in scientific fact and scientific protocol, but the results point to our physical reality being far stranger and more malleable than commonly taught. Mr. Mera claims that magnetic anomaly zones have the highest concentrations of UFO activity. Strange lights, music, maybe even time disturbances, reported cryptid and or humanoid encounters, poltergeist and or haunting activity, Sasquatch encounters, fairy experiences at ports, even suicides, and maybe most importantly here, unexplained, unexpected disappearances, especially in and or near the woods. We got to thinking, if this is all true, What if it's the reason for the hauntings, the cryptids, the UFOs, the lights, the disappearances? Could they be connected in ways that we are yet to broadly understand? Is this why certain land masses are just seemingly naturally bizarre? Still, we needed to dig deeper. Although we can't know what the magnetic landscape in the area was like in the 1600s when bizarre reports originally began to arise, we can know what it is reported to be today, and we can use that to map out, to document more modern reports of activity and disappearances. So we did. It may seem unbelievable that land itself can be haunted, or a doll or a statue possessed, or that aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot, goblins, other humanoids, fairies, and other lesser known high strangeness is connected. But that's what our investigation seems to suggest. In that geographical area, it appears that not only is the magnetic activity far outside of what is generally considered normal for areas with no or few paranormal disturbances, but the modern day list of paranormal reports left me stunned. In all my years of investigating and resolving paranormal complaints, I've never come across such a breadth or depth of activity in one spot. In our secondary investigation, we discovered recent accounts of supernatural humanoids posing as what human beings would call generically witches, a smattering of goblin encounters, strange water appearing out of nowhere in one witness's home, among other unexplained events that residents are rather hard-pressed to discuss publicly. Sometimes the activity is intense enough that priests and paranormal experts are called in. And this has been reported as a regular occurrence since the beginning of the territory. Although some locals seem to suggest that they were willing to speak about their experiences privately, off the record, not a single soul was willing to give their blessing to be filmed or quoted officially, presumably for fear of harassment. Regardless, with everything from the original investigation, the information from Missing 411 and Steve Mera, our own investigation now, our intuition, and years of study, we felt that it was reasonable to mark this case as quite possibly being an unexplained disappearance with paranormal cause. We resumed contact with the original source close to the case, and we told her so. But here is where the mystery deepens. In reviewing all material available and examining people close to the case itself, we were able to pick up some previously undisclosed information. It seems that the missing man in question was deeply in love with a young local woman. By all accounts, she had his full attention from the moment they met, and she seemed to routinely encourage his pursuit. Not everyone was content to endorse the budding relationship, however. Another young-ish man had been attempting to win this particular woman's hand for many moons, and our subject's appearance on the scene created social ripples enough to stir the flames of jealousy within this romantic rival. Although there are no formal charges or police reports, witnesses locally did insist that our subject was physically assaulted by the angry Romeo at least twice before his disappearance. In interviewing the investigative lead, we tried to piece together a timeline of events. This is what we found. Subject moved into town a little over a year before his disappearance. He became an elementary age teacher upon move-in. Immediately after moving into town, he launched his side business as a singing teacher. Within 2 months, he met and began to romantically pursue a woman. Within a month of the pursuit beginning, the rival discovered it and began verbally confronting the now missing man. Within 6 months, Subject had become a popular, familiar pillar of the community. By approximately 9 months of his presence in the community, the rival had escalated his competition with the newcomer into physical altercations, grabbing, shoving, attempted blows at least twice, and finally, the disappearance. According to our source and all available information, what follows is an account of the missing man's last night on Earth. On the evening of October 31st, he had happily accepted an invitation to his love interest's home, where the annual Halloween party was in full swing. He arrived alone, dressed as depicted in our sketch, and proceeded to eat, drink, dance, and be merry. All accounts paint him as being sober and lucid from beginning to end. Although we were unable to locate him in any photos that may have been taken that night, we were fortunate to access enough material that allowed us to collect a full description of the missing man, his costume choice for the night, his likely state of mind, and the path he was apparently known to take to and from the location. According to all local witnesses, he spent several hours feasting, laughing, dancing, and schmoozing, enjoying the live entertainment provided by the hosting family. Every resource seems to point to the fact that the party went exactly as planned, just like every other year. Despite the fact that both romantic competitors were in the same house and took turns interacting with the desired young woman, we could find no reports of violence or disruption between them that night. The mystery only begins, they say, after the clock struck 12, when guests made their pardon. Sometime between midnight and 2:00 a.m. on November 1st, our missing man made his way home. He was reported to be the very last guest to depart and left as he had arrived, quite alone. Somewhere on his route home, he seemed simply to have vanished. We were entirely unable to reach his rival for comment, and no reports exist of this man having any alibi for the time of the disappearance. In fact, he has been, and he still is, considered the main and only human suspect for the disappearance, if there could be no paranormal explanation for it. Character reports from witnesses and community records state that he has only ever been known to be good-natured, productive, and a little mischievous, but if love and a future are at stake, what if he was willing to commit the unthinkable, especially if it guaranteed his romantic success? And still, there is the other side of the investigation. What if he really was carried away by some spook? This area is specifically known, as we discovered earlier, for extreme paranormal activity, and especially for a myriad of radical ghost and humanoid encounters. If the records are accurate, our missing man's home was separated from the party location by a portion of the forest. The haunted forest, which we can see now on maps, seems to have extreme patterns of magnetic activity, which really might be directly involved with mysterious disappearances and paranormal activity. Interestingly, the most common report in that area is indeed that of a headless horseman. With all of the legends and warnings in the area, would you brave a potentially deadly haunted forest? What if a chance at love and the future you desperately desired were at stake? What if it's all true, and it's more than just a bunch of hocus pocus? On the morning of November 1st, some final pieces of evidence were apparently found, though evidence of what exactly we may never actually know. If the formal published account is accurate, then muddy horseshoe prints, the subject's hat, and a smashed pumpkin, well, actually a jack-o'-lantern, with maybe odd evidence of strong fire exposure in parts, were found amongst the fallen leaves, which were described to decorate the scene like unsettling confetti. The old covered bridge, it stood in resolute defiance in the sunshine, alluding perhaps boldly to the potential bloodshed of the night before. In the aftermath, according to records, no one has ever heard from the missing man again. His disappearance has never been solved either way, and this is where we need your help. What do you think happened? Are you a local? Was he abducted by a ghoulish gallivanter? Or is that just a distraction from the truth, that he was murdered by his clever, opportunistic rival? Whichever way you come to interpret it, I hope you've enjoyed my investigation into and my modern retelling of the legend of Sleepy Hollow. Trick or treat. Although the missing person, Ichabod Crane, probably isn't a real person and never was, I found myself surprised to learn that the most recent scientific paranormal understanding of haunted places seems to indicate some major genuine connection between magnetic anomaly zones, forests, and paranormal activity, up to and including persistent humanoid encounters and possibly true missing 411 cases. Maybe the most surprising fact of all, though, is that the Headless Horseman might be real. During my research, this halted everything in its tracks. I expected to do some creative storytelling and to mix in some scientific recent discoveries and or theories to maybe educate and entertain you, but to find allegedly true accounts about Headless Horsemen, that was out of the question. Well, that was until I found a webpage on the Travel Channel's website, and it insists that the legend of Sleepy Hollow's malevolent Headless Horseman stems from a true tragedy. Is there really such a thing, though, as a Headless Horseman ghost, intelligence, or specter? And if so, who or what are they, and what in the world do they want from human people? This discovery of a real-life, physical origin story is one thing, but does that automatically mean that the ghost of that man is haunting Sleepy Hollow, New York? And what about the tales of encounters elsewhere with Headless Horsemen? In preparation for this special, I found at least 3 other accounts of interactions with such a spirit or being, as well as near ancient legends about them in other countries, stories that predate Irving's famous yarn by hundreds of years, if all is correct. So, what could this be? The Celtic peoples of yore often told stories of fairy beings. These were passed down endlessly through the generations, and they still persist today. Though Washington Irving's tale was based on a live human soldier who lost his head due to a cannon blast, the Celts claim to be having direct encounters with a solitary fairy type that they have named the Dullahan. Unlike Tinkerbell, the Dullahan was said to be headless, to smell of rotten things, only appear at night in the forest, and to have an unpredictable attitude towards all human people. Certain legends claim that the dead human people sometimes joined the ranks of the Fae, becoming beings like the Dullahan themselves. The next and final tale in our adventure tonight has been delivered to each generation since its alleged happening. All those years ago. And like all of the greatest tales, so our story begins. Once upon a time, there was an Irishman, a fine fellow. His name was Charlie. He loved horses, racing, and most of all, sportsmanship, to the point that he lived a life of deep respect towards all he met. One dark summer night, Charlie caught himself in the nearby forest, alone with and astride his trusty horse. As he moseyed along the trail in the darkness, he realized that he was being joined by a mysterious set of companions. Despite the fact that Charlie heard nothing, he saw a flash of light in his peripheral vision, which is what originally caused him to glance over. And when he did, he found himself stunned to see the floating white head of an ethereal horse. Following shortly behind was the body of the horse, with the headless figure dressed all in black and perched silently atop. Charlie took note that the man clutched his head to his ribs, as it was entirely detached from the usual place of securement. Charlie rode quietly alongside them for a moment until he was able to calm his mind and steel his nerves. As soon as he was able, he said, in essence, to the headless horseman, "You have a fine steed and a finer stride." To which the horseman said, "You may say that with your own ugly mouth." Imagine to be insulted by such a person. The formal description of him is such. Quote, "It looked like a large cream cheese hung round with black puddings. The skin lay stretched over the unearthly surface. Two fiery eyes of prodigious circumference with a strange and irregular motion flashed like meteors upon Charlie, and a huge mouth reached from either extremity of the two ears, which peeped forth under a profusion of matted locks of lustrous blackness." The account continues. This head, which the figure had evidently hitherto concealed from Charlie's eyes, now burst upon his view in all its hideousness. Now shaking and afraid, Charlie forced himself to remain calm. Every cell in his body ached to flee, but instead, he asked the horseman if he'd ever raced across the countryside. In response, the Dullahan complimented his courage and accepted the game with glee. In the end, the story goes that Charlie lost the race, but gained much more. After the race, the headless horseman approached Charlie and congratulated him on his bravery, friendliness, sportsmanship, and passion for horse racing, as no one had indulged him in a race since the day that he and his horse had fallen to their deaths 100 years before, perishing from broken necks. As a reward for his kindness and his demeanor, the Dullahan promised Charlie that as long as he remained such a kind, brave, passionate person, he would always be by his side. Charlie allegedly went on to win a big race the very next day, taking home a large cash prize and living happily ever after with his new friend, a silent, strange guardian angel indeed. When all is said and done, who or what are the headless horsemen? Are they interdimensional or spectral people? Hallucinations? Ghosts? Psychopomps? Tulpas? Could they be aliens, or maybe more traditional fairies or gods or goddesses posing as headless humanoids in order to achieve some mysterious agenda? What if there really are some kind, generous, wise, non-human, or at minimum less physical, people in the woods? And if so, do they seek out human people to interact with or test on occasion in order to influence, reward, or to punish them as they see fit? Looking at the modern evidence, the accounts, the science and theories at hand today alongside the old accounts and the old records, though I do have my own personal suspicions, for me one question is always heads above the rest. Don't you just love a good mystery? I do.
Just gather round and I'll elucidate on what goes on outside when it gets late. Long about midnight, the ghosts and banshees, they get together for their nightly jamboree. There's things with horns and saucer eyes, Some with fangs about this size.
Some are fat and some are thin.
And some don't even wear their skin.
Oh, I'm telling you, brother, it's a frightful sight to see what goes on Halloween night. When spooks have a midnight jamboree, they break it up with fiendish glee. Ghosts are bad, but the one that's cursed is the headless horseman. He's the worst.
That's why he's a fight on Halloween night.
But when he goes jogging across the land, holding his noggin in his hand, demons take one look and groan and hit the road for parts unknown.
Beware, take care, he rides alone.
And there's no spook like Spook could spurn.
They don't like him and he's really burned.
He swears to the longest day he's dead, he'll show them that he can get ahead. They say he's tired of his flaming top. He's got a yen to make a swap. So he rides one night each year to find a head in the hollow here.
Now he likes them little, he likes them big.
Or in the middle or awake,
Black or white or even red.
the headless horseman needs a head with a hip, hip, and a clippity clap. He's out looking for a cotton chop, so don't stop to figure out a plan. You can't reason with a headless man. Now, if you doubt this tale is so, I met that spook just a year ago. Now, I didn't stop for a second look, but made for the bridge that spans the brook. But once you cross that bridge, my friend,
The ghost is through his power and
so when you're riding home tonight, make for the bridge with all your might. He'll be down in the hollow there. He needs your head. Look out! Beware!
with a hip, hip, and a clippity clop.
He's down looking for a head to swap.
So don't try to figure out a